My name is Konrad Bouffard. I'm the owner of Round Rock Honey Company in Round Rock, Texas. Most people don't know that honeybees are not native to North America. They were brought here from Europe with European settlement to Texas and expanded all over North America.
With the recent heat and no rain, does that play on the survivability of bees?
Well, what we saw in the drought, this was by far the worst drought ever, but I mean, not by a little bit, by a large amount. It was absolutely terrible this year, and it did decrease our honey flow by 90%.
Wow!
But it did not necessarily kill off the bees. The bees will get rid of the drones, and they'll increase their operating efficiency inside the hive. But the queen, when she can, will continue to lay eggs and will continue to function within the hive. And so we saw our bees survive. They just didn't produce any honey. In regards to the shortage of bees in Texas, most of the bees, the bee die-off that we've had in Texas and around the United States has been mainly because of the way that we move the bees around and the way that we use them for pollinating. At Round Rock Honey, we don't move our bees around and we don't expose them to crops that have pesticides in them. The neonicotinoids produced by Bayer AgriScience are primarily responsible, in my opinion, for the die-off of the bees, and I think that most other beekeepers would agree with that. What is honey, and how many different kinds of honey are there? Well, honey is, I guess, about 60 to 70% water, sometimes as high as 86% water, and then the remainder is pollen and sugars from the nectar inside plants. For every different kind of flower and every different kind of climate, there's a different type of honey. So, honey, the flavor of honey can change according to humidity levels, according to rain levels, according to the flora that's in an area. Even in an area like Austin, we have multiple, biomes and multiple mini climates within a certain geographic area, and every one of those can produce different honey. Even within a certain bee yard, we'll have, say, 9 or 10 hives, and if it's true wildflower honey, each one of those hives will produce basically similar but slightly different honey. So honey can range from clear all the way to pitch black, and most of it is in the middle, chestnut brown. But it has a good range of color and a good range of flavor and a lot of variety.
Briefly talk about the benefits of honey.
Well, honey is hygroscopic, which means that it can help retain water. So because of that, it helps in wound dressing. It's also antibacterial. So if you have sunburn or if you have a wound, it can help with that quite a bit. It also helps quite a bit with allergies if you ingest it regularly. It won't prevent colds or do things like that, but my gut feeling is that it does help you recover from all those things much better than, say, something else that you would eat. Honey is a superfood, similar to kale, mustard, greens, those sorts of things, and all those things taken together, it adds up to, if you're already eating, say, kale, and you add honey to your diet as well, and that's 2 superfoods that are very, very good for your body. Also, honey is pre-digested by the bees, so your body doesn't have to work as hard to get it into the bloodstream. And what that results in is the honey being absorbed directly into the blood, which gives you an immediate energy boost if you're, say, involved in an athletic event or something like that. What other byproducts are there that bees produce? There's Propolis, which is a gummy substance that bees use to seal up the hive. It's kind of like the caulk around the perimeter of the hive that maintains and changes the wind flow inside the hive. There's also wax. Human beings produce wax in the same way that bees do, from a gland on the mandible. It's just that a bee's mandible is down here, and so they produce that wax. It goes out, and then they use the mandibles to shape, the hive. So there's wax. There's Propolis. You can put in a pollen trap in a hive, and bees will come in, and the pollen from their body that they collect out in the field will scrape off and be collected in the pollen trap. Some people I know see the bees themselves as a byproduct of the hive. So whenever a bee dies, they'll candy it. I don't do that I think that's actually kind of gross, but some people like to do that. So,
how long does it take to make, one of your average sized jars of honey from start to finish? Is there a time that takes?
well, if you don't have many hives, and if you don't take care of them, then you're not going to be able to run a honey company. Because with us, when we first started, we had the first few years that we started, we had exceptional rain, and so we were getting upwards of 120 to 160 pounds of honey per hive. It was huge honey flow. But then drought came in about year 4 and 5, and we saw the need to dramatically increase the number of hives that we had, and so we did that. And that has been our saving grace in periods of drought. This year, we would have run out in June if not for the fact that we're licensed up to 4,000 hives. We draw off of over 4,262 hives, I think is the number that we're at now. So you have to have a lot of hives in order to create the honey flow that we create. Now, as for the question as to how long it takes to make a jar of honey, one drop of honey is equivalent to the life work of a bee. So if you have 50,000 or 200,000 bees in a hive, of course the 200,000 bees will be able to produce more honey than the 50,000 bees. But having said that, the 50,000 bees may be able to produce a little bit quicker if the conditions are better for them than, say, the larger hive. And then there's also the fact of that there are a lot of parasitic bugs that both eat the bees and eat honey. Ants, for example, eat quite a bit of honey, and if they get into the hive, it doesn't matter how much the bees are producing because it's all going to be eaten by these other parasitic insects anyway. So,
what's the process of making honey?
Well, step one of making honey involves the bees going out and collecting water and collecting pollen and nectar from the plants, coming back to the hive. They regurgitate it from their bee stomach, which sounds gross to us. It sounds like vomiting, but it's not. It's really more just taking it out of a certain gland, bee stomach, which is not really a stomach. It's more like a holding sac for nectar. And then they regurgitate it back into the hive. It's very liquidy at that point. They fan it down for about 12 hours or so, and then they cap it with wax. And then once we get, then that's the finished product. Then we go in, we take a whole frame out, uncap it, put it in a spinner, spin it out. The water or the honey goes against the side of the collecting tank down to the bottom, and goes through a metal filter that or a metal sieve that collects bee legs and bee wings that have gotten caught up in the honey, and then into the bottle, and that's about it. As to the history of Round Rock honey, I was teaching school at Travis High School in South Austin. I loved teaching, but the money was terrible. I mean, it wasn't a living wage, especially with a family. And my wife, and I together, we just needed more money. Plus, we found out that we were, going to be having kids. So it was one of these situations where the need for extra income met the desire to do something that I really enjoyed, and then those two things came together with the opportunity of the Austin Farmers Market opening up. So we went down, we sold at the Austin Farmers Market. I sold vegetables from my garden, and it would take me all day to sell those, but the honey from my hives, it sold in a matter of minutes. And so I brought more the next week, and it sold in a matter of minutes. And it was just that repeated for about 4 weeks. And I took all that money that I'd made, and I bought a few other hives. And then I also partnered with a woman who had substantially more hives than I did, and she gave me some of the hives, and I bought some of her hives, and then I put those out on some land in Georgetown and some land in Round Rock, and then I just built from there. So that's kind of how everything started.
I know you have a beekeeping class. What kind of things do you cover, and what will the students leave with? Like, if I took the class, would I be able to go home, start my own little beehive, and have honey for myself, or does it involve more than what you're class does.
Right. Well, we have two different beekeeping classes. We have one that is a discounted beekeeping class. It's a 1 day. It's really more for like the ecotourist crowd, for people who don't necessarily want to keep bees. They just kind of want to get their hands in a hive and see the bees and see them at work. It's more like a curiosity, that sort of thing. So with those guys, it's $39 through Groupon, or $125 if you don't go through Groupon. And we offer those only a few times a year, and they go out to the bee yard. We talk a little bit about the lifespan of a bee, the names of the parts of the hive, the names of the suit. We show them the queen if we can find her. We show them the differences between brood and honey, and just generally give them the idea of what a working hive is like. Others attend our master class, which is a year-long class where they become master beekeepers, they may not. It depends on really the person taking the class, their ability and how committed they are, because most of it is self-study. So we'll point them in the right direction, but they have to do the work. In other words, we're not going to make them master beekeepers. We're going to give them the tools to do it themselves, and that'll include a lot of repetition in the bee yard, a lot of going through the steps of checking the hive and doing this and doing that, all the things that need to be done. And we're also going to expose them to a number of different beehives in the area, and also in other cities where we have our other beekeeping academies. Through the masterclass, they have the ability to go to all those other cities.
Do I need a big piece of land? How hard would it be for me to actually have a hive and actually produce a yield every once in a while?
Well, if you want to just have one or two hives, and you have a regular sized backyard, then you should be able to do that.
Wow.
But your homeowners association probably won't like that. They're probably going to ask you to get rid of them. The standard for how much land you need for hives is no more than 12 hives per acre for sustainable beekeeping. And so if you divide 12 by an acre, that's how many square feet you need in order to keep bees.
Kind of explain the importance of the benefits of bees to farming and to society in general.
Well, about 80% of our food is pollinated by bees. Squash, zucchini, watermelons, all kinds of nuts, cantaloupe, other apple trees, oranges, everything, or the majority of what you see that is fruit or vegetable based in the grocery store is pollinated by bees. So without bees, we would be eating oatmeal most of the time, and that'd be about it.
Exactly. I know I have plants that this year I got no fruit,
Right.
because no one was pollinating these things. So
Right.
what flowers can I plant to attract bees to my yard?
Well, the bees really like sage and all the let's see, sage, rosemary, onion, all the plants that have a really strong, pungent odor. They also like persimmon. They love persimmon. Plants that or flowers that have concentric circles on them, and that are red or pink or
see.
So the bees are attracted more to that. Roses, they love roses. But I wouldn't go out of my way to plant things for them. Maybe plant one or two things, but there are things bigger than the plants that may be holding back the bees. Maybe there's not good access to water.
Briefly touch on the equipment that a beekeeper needs if I was going to do this in my yard. I know you probably want a suit,
Sure.
clothing, smokers, stuff like that.
The equipment to use when a beekeeper is a suit with a veil, gloves, a hive tool, a smoker, maybe some frame grips which help you pull the frames out of the hive, and then that's all you would really need, other than a good clean box and some good healthy bees to go in it. Then you might later on need some, like a collection tank and a few other things like that to help with the harvesting of the honey.
Is placement, how important is placement when you have a hive in your backyard?
Well, you want to orient the hives toward the sun, so that when the bee, because the
South
bees,
facing.
South or southeast, so that the bees, whenever they fly out, can fly toward the sun and orient themselves easily. And we like to locate our bees along hedgerows, so like along fence lines.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to put them in the middle of the field. Some people will put them in the middle of the field, but we like to put them on fence lines. That typically, we find better results that way.
Nice. Oh, and I saw a video, and I know there's different kinds of worker bees. Name, I don't know, how many are there, and what's their
Sure.
job?
Well, there's the worker bee, and 98% of the hive is female. So there's the worker bee, and then there's the queen bee. There's only one. Usually there's one queen in the hive. Sometimes there's more. But if there's more than one queen, then they're going to fight with each other for control. Then you have within the worker community, you have the nurse bees that take care of the young. You have other subgroups like that. You have sentry bees that guard the front entrance. You have the bees that go out and collect in the field, and a lot of their duties depend on their age. So at the end of life, the bees are out foraging in the field, and at the beginning of life, they're working inside the hive. So.
Nice.